Hello everyone, my name is Malika Fahima Adalia, and today I want to share my thoughts about the documentary film Pesta Babi, Colonialism in Our Time. Before watching this film, I thought it would mainly talk about environmental issues in Papua. I expected to learn about deforestation, land use, and the impact of development projects. However, after watching the documentary, I realized that it is about much more than the environment. It is also about people, culture, identity, and the relationship between development and justice. While watching the film, I felt so many emotions. I felt sad, but I was also angry. The documentary shows how development projects can affect indigenous communities in ways that are often overlooked. It reminded me that behind every project, every road, and every piece of infrastructure, there are real people whose lives are directly affected. The person who stayed in my mind the most was Jacinta Moiwent. There was a scene where she watched large ships carrying heavy equipment into her homeland. It may seem like a simple moment, but it had a strong impact on me. When I watched that scene, I kept thinking about how frightening it must be to see your home changing so quickly, especially when you do not know what those changes will mean for your future. What affects me the most was the way the documentary explained the importance of the forest. For many people, a forest might just look like a collection of trees, but for indigenous communities, the forest is much more than that. It is their home, it provides foods and resources, it is connected to their traditions, their history, and their identity. Because of that, when a forest is destroyed, they are not only losing trees, they are losing a part of their lives, they are losing places that hold memories, traditions, and cultural things. This perspective made me think differently about environmental issues. Sometimes we talk about protecting nature only in terms of climate change or biodiversity. Those things are important, but this documentary reminded me that protecting nature is also about protecting people. One thing that made me angry was the difference in how culture is treated in Indonesia. We often celebrate local cultures and traditions. We protect them, we promote them, and even use them as part of tourism. We proudly talk about cultural diversity as one of Indonesia's strengths. However, while watching this documentary, I kept asking myself one question. If we truly value indigenous cultures, why do some indigenous communities still have to fight to protect the land where their culture exists? Culture does not exist separately from the people and places connected to it. Traditional knowledge, customs, and ways of life are often closely linked to the land. When communities lose access to their land, parts of their culture can also be threatened. This contradiction was something that stayed in my mind throughout the film. As someone from Eastern Indonesia, this documentary felt very personal to me. Sometimes I feel like many development projects take place in Eastern Indonesia, but local communities are often the ones who experience the biggest impacts. They lose forests, land, and sometimes even their traditional way of life. I want to be clear that I'm not against development. I believe development is important. We need better infrastructure, education, healthcare, jobs, and economic opportunities. Development can improve people's life and help communities grow. But I also think that development should listen to the people who are most affected by it. Local communities should have a voice in decisions that affect their land and their future. Development should not only focus on economic benefits, it should also consider social, cultural, and environmental impacts. Another thing I appreciated about this documentary is the way it tells its story. Instead of focusing only on statistics, policies, or government plans, it gives space to real people. We hear their voices, see their emotions, and understand their experiences. Because of that, the documentary feels very human. I think this approach makes the message much more powerful. Numbers and reports are important, but personal stories helps us understand the real consequence of decisions. They remind us that these issues are not just political or economic discussions. They affect people's everyday lives. After watching this documentary, I found myself thinking about bigger questions. Who benefits from development? Who carries the burden when change happens? How can development be more fair? And how can communities be included in decisions that affect them? I do not have all the answers to those questions. However, I think the documentary encouraged us to think about them and to pay attention to voices that are not always heard. For me, Pesta Babi is not just a documentary about Papua. It is a documentary about people, culture, identity, and justice. It challenged viewers to think more deeply about development and to consider the human impact behind it. Overall, I think this documentary is powerful and meaningful. It made me reflect on issues that I had never thought about deeply before. It also reminded me that behind every development project, there are real people whose lives can be changed forever. Thank you so much.